And now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. This morning, I was talking about Will Smith smacking Chris Rock and how I think it might be staged. More people are coming out saying that may be the case because Chris Rock moves with the hand in the direction, which is like a fight choreography thing, I guess, so that you don't actually get hurt. You move with the hand. Anyway, I talked about that. It's fun to talk about celebrity gossip. But as I mentioned, now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Biden's job approval rating hits lowest point of his presidency as most Americans think the U.S. is headed in the wrong direction. Most Americans would be correct. President Joe Biden's approval rating keeps falling. In his second year in the White House, just 40% of Americans approve of the job he's doing. An NBC News survey finds the lowest rating Biden has seen in his presidency. Now, of course, I need not tell you that in aggregate, it's actually substantially worse than just this one poll. But I'll tell you this, Joe Biden, in his utmost desperate time, very desperate, is proposing a 20% minimum tax on the ultra wealthy that could see Elon Musk paying up to $24 billion a year on his unrealized gains from stock value. That is, let me make sure I can clear this up for you guys. What this is actually saying is that the government will seize 20% of an individual's net worth if they have at least $100 million or more. I got to be honest, I'm not super concerned about people with $100 million. I am concerned, however, with the government taking people's money by force and to an extreme degree. Obviously, a lot of people think taxation is theft. I don't think some taxation is theft. I think a lot of taxation is theft. But of course, I must be the milquetoast fencer on this one. Some taxes I think are fine. Maybe what we really need is tax reform. I like the idea that, we kind of pitch into a subscription service for certain things that we don't really want privatized. Maybe some people do. I personally don't. And there's a debate about it. If we vote on it and it changes, I wouldn't cry. I just, figure out how to navigate. But paramedics, firefighters, I think firefighters and police, it's got to be public. With firefighters especially. Imagine, someone's house is burning and the fire department pulls up and they're like, that person doesn't subscribe to our service, so we're going to let it burn. You can't. Because then the fire burns everyone else's buildings. What do? We're going to douse only the left and the right houses. The one in the middle can burn down, but we'll make sure the other ones don't burn down. That's ridiculous. You've got to stop the fires. Well, let's get started with Joe Biden's failing approval rating before we jump into why he may be proposing something so insane, which will never go anywhere. CNBC says, Biden's 3 percentage point drop in job approval since January comes as a large majority of Americans continue to say the United States is headed in the wrong direction, the poll found. A total of 71% of respondents to the poll said they believe the country is off on the wrong track. What is that? That is a single percentage point less than the portion of respondents who gave that answer in the same poll taken in mid-January. The latest grim numbers for Biden come as he leads a Western coalition backing Ukraine's resistance to its invasion by Russia. Americans are dealing with an inflation rate not seen since the 80s. And as the U.S. enters the third full year of the COVID pandemic, I don't even pay attention to half this stuff anymore. I got to be honest. Inflation, obviously, but I mean like COVID and, Russia, Ukraine. Yeah, this is stuff you can't escape, to be completely honest. But the COVID stuff, I'm like, people still doing that? What this poll says is that President Biden and Democrats are headed for a catastrophic election. Republican pollster Bill McInturff of Public Opinion Strategy, who conducted the survey with Democratic pollster Jeff Horwit of Hart Research Associates, told NBC News. They surveyed 1,000 adults, 790 whom were registered voters over 4 days last week. It is a margin of error of 3.1%. All right. They're going to say that Democrats hold a narrow 12-vote majority in the House. Democrats only control the Senate because of the tie-breaking vote from the vice president, which means Republicans need only one seat in the Senate, or technically one defector. And in the House, they need to win, only 7 seats to flip things in their control. Maybe I'm doing the math wrong, but you get the point. They know it's bad. This, my friends, move from Joe Biden, this minimum tax, is insane. And I think it shows the utmost desperation. Biden is trying to win over progressives who have largely abandoned him. But it seems kind of weird, right? We just saw the State of the Union address, where Joe Biden basically said a whole bunch of Trumpian things. I wonder, is Joe Biden going for a split media strategy here? In the State of the Union, you're getting a lot of TV viewers These are going to be older people. So Biden comes out and he says things that sound very Trumpian, trying to attract middle-aged voters. Online, we get this viral story about Biden's new proposal. This is going to be shared among many progressives. Who will you believe? Which Joe Biden will you believe? The centrist protect the borders Joe Biden who says, I'm a capitalist? Or the internet Joe Biden who says, we're gonna put a minimum tax on unrealized gains for these billionaires? Come on, man. Who? How about this? How about you pay attention to all of it and you realize Joe Biden is crooked and he's just going to say whatever he has to say, right? The Daily Mail reports President Joe Biden is reportedly planning to propose a new minimum tax targeting billionaires, establishing a 20% levy on all American households with more than $100 million. So it's not a billionaire tax. It's a $100 millionaire tax. The White House plans to unveil the billionaire minimum income tax on Monday as part of Biden's 2023 budget plan, according to the Washington Post. But it would have to pass through Congress to become law and would likely face stiff opposition from some quarters. I got to pause for a minute. If you came to me and said you wanted to increase the progressive tax rate on people who make more than $100 million, I'd be like, okay, yeah, for sure, I'm down, whatever. But if you come to me and say you want to tax their unrealized gains, then I'm like, yeah, that makes no sense. The proposal aims to close a purported loophole that benefits the nation's 700-odd billionaires, many of whom have most of their wealth in stock, which is not taxed until it is sold for a profit, which makes sense. If I have an orange and I bought it for $1 and then I just hold on to it for a couple days and then someone says you can eat that orange, I'll sell it to you for $2. I made a $1 profit on my orange. I then pay the tax on that profit. Now, I'm not even necessarily a big fan of that kind of taxation, but, you know, there's a certain point where I'm like, some taxes I think are okay. I don't know how I feel about the income tax, to be completely honest. But for the time being, if we're going to be in a progressive tax system on income, I think we need to scale up the income brackets. We need to create more. The problem, however, is that just giving money to government doesn't solve any of the problems. So I don't know what the point is in the long run. The White House plan would mandate billionaires to pay a tax rate of at least 20% on their total income, including the combination of traditional forms of wage income and whatever they may have made in unrealized gains or the rising value of stock before it's sold. That's psychotic. This should never be allowed. And mark my words, you better pay attention to this. If the government has a right to tax you on unrealized gains, the government can come and say, hey, you bought a car last year, right? And you're like, yeah, I did. There's a car shortage right now. Your car's worth double. It is? I wasn't going to sell it. Doesn't matter. That $2,000 car is now worth $4,000. That's a $2,000 unrealized gain. I'm afraid you're going to have to pay us 20% on top. So you owe us $400. And then, wait, I owe you $400 because I own the car? Well, you know, the car's valuing up. Says who? Says us. But I don't have $400. Why didn't you sell the car? Okay, I sold the car and I only got $2,000 for it. Oh, only $2,000? We thought it was worth $4,000. Well, you still owe us 20% on the total sale. So where's that $400? The government could force you to sell property? That's insane. And don't think it'll stop with the billionaires. When they launched the income tax, they were like, it is but a meager tax on only the wealthiest. You regular working Joes have nothing to worry about. We're not taxing you. But then once it's law, every year they just move it down a little bit, further and further. Until, yeah, you buy a house. Think about it this way. They say $100 million. What happens when inflation hits and your house that's worth $500 is now worth $1 million? Because we're already seeing it. Houses that were worth, $300 are going for $400 these days. What happens when you buy a house for $300K, you save up for 10 years or whatever, you put that down payment down, you buy the house, and they say, you own this house, right? Right. You also have a mortgage on the house. Okay. If you own the house and you have a mortgage, now this may not apply in all circumstances, but consider this. The house goes up in value by double. And they say your $300,000 house is now $600,000. That's a $300,000 unrealized gain. And you say, well, I still owe $300,000 on the mortgage. And they were like, And they say, sure, but your debts have nothing to do with your gains, right? You've always had the debt. No, you've gained 300K in value. You owe us 20%. 60 grand on my house? And they're going to be like, you owe us $60,000 because your house went up in value. Now, of course, right now, they're not proposing that. But think about where we're at. Where will this bring us in 50 years? What happens when $100 million is the equivalent of $1,000? Maybe it won't ever get that high, but I certainly think so. When I was a kid, when I was your age, candy bars cost 45 cents. They're triple the cost now. Triple. The house I grew up in, I think it's worth like quadruple. Like the amount of money that it went for in the early 90s to today is like 350% increase. So here's what you got to consider. Inflation, value increase, and the lowering of this threshold. It's 100 million now, but it'll come down. They say, although the proposed tax would apply to all American households worth more than $100 million, the White House says the majority of new revenue raised by the tax would come from billionaires. It's always a big trick, isn't it? Since taking office, Biden has faced a clamor from the progressive wing of his party to impose some kind of new tax targeting the ultra-wealthy. Yeah, they want the wealth tax. But until now, the exact form of such a plan has remained unclear. As inequality has grown in the nation, proponents of a billionaire's tax have pointed out the richest Americans often pay a much lower effective tax rate than middle-class workers if their unrealized stock gains are treated as income, which is insane. You see the lie here? Let me tell you a story, my friends. I have a lot of money. I pay more than half of the money I get in taxes. More than half. And that's not counting sales tax. I'm talking about if you send me money, typically, because of the way everything works, about half of that goes to taxes. Half. And people are like, would you tax the rich more? Well, truth be told, to a certain degree, I'm one of those people. But taxing properly, it doesn't make sense to have an unrealized gain tax rate, to claim the wealthy are not being taxed at the same rate as Americans. There are certain things people need to understand. You see these guys, they come out and they're like, I've decided that my $1 million salary is too much, so I'm going to raise the salary of all of my employees and drop my salary down. And then they announce some random number. They'll say, we're going to give $80,000 to all of our employees, and I, the CEO, will reduce my salary to $80,000. And he says, because this is the right thing to do, and everyone claps, right? Because to the untrained, to the undiscerning, the undiscerning, whatever the word would be, they think the CEO is now making less money. No, the profits still exist in the company, and they can still be paid out as this individual sees fit. But when profits are paid out, they're taxed at a lower rate. So when someone who's the CEO of a company making millions of dollars announces he's lowering his salary, I wonder if what really happens is they're like, okay, if we increase the salaries of everybody to $80,000, we're going to spend an additional, like $200,000 or $300,000 in labor costs, including the increase in wages and the increased tax, because you get taxed on both ends. Or you get taxed 7.5% and the employee pays a 7.5% tax. However, it provides cover for the CEO to say, I'm reducing my salary by $920,000, which would save you 7%. Maybe this current math, the numbers I'd have to go through, but the general idea is you could save money if you could plausibly argue you're no longer taking a massive salary. So if your company, if your CEO makes $5 million and he says, I'm dropping it down $4.92 million in my salary because it's the right thing to do, but then he still pays himself a massive profit share, he can argue, look, I lowered my salary to make a statement. Granted, the IRS is going to be like, nice try, buddy. You owe us that money. Now there's a cap, I think, on employment taxes, but you get the point. People try and play these dirty games. I don't think a wealth tax makes sense. It won't work. Elon Musk would have to pay $24.2 billion this year, which means he'd have to sell stock he's not legally allowed to sell. It makes no sense. The world's richest men, including Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, have much of their wealth in the form of stock. As their stock rises in value, they are able to finance lavish lifestyles by taking out loans secured by their stock holdings. But loans are not taxed as income. And in many cases, the interest payments are tax deductible. So this is so dumb. In many cases, the reason they do that, they take a loan out on their shares are worth $100 million. They're hoping The shares will go up to, 200 million, and then they need only sell half as many shares to pay off that loan. The rising value of stock holdings, known as unrealized gains, is also not taxed as income. And why would it be? If I'm holding an object and you tell me it's worth 10 times more, I got to pay you taxes on that? I don't have the money. Give a homeless guy a solid gold fiddle, and they'll be like, you just earned income worth the value of the solid gold fiddle. Can you sell a solid gold fiddle? Probably not. How would you pay taxes on it? And therein lies the big challenge with the way our tax system works. It ultimately just keeps poor people poor. And the left celebrates this. We had Jeremy Boring, co-CEO of the Daily Wire on last week. And I asked him this on the show because he said he didn't make more than $25,000 a year until he was 35. And I said, was it shocking, the restrictions you discovered on your money once you became rich? And he's like, oh, yeah. You can't give people money. People don't know this. You can't give money away. You literally can't. Up to $15,000, right? You can. So some people seem to think that I think it's because the average person, like, look, $15,000 is a lot of money. It's like 20% or even, $15,000 could be 20 or 30% of someone's income, maybe even 40% someone's yearly income, depending on what their salary is. So, when you think about small things, you can give money away. I can go out and buy, a PlayStation 5 and give it to someone, tax-free gift. But when you're very wealthy and you want to give money to somebody, say you want to help somebody out and you're like, I think this person's fantastic. You need to find a legal means to do it through investment, through a loan, through work for hire, and it has to be legitimate work for hire. You can't hire someone let's say you have a company and you're a burger restaurant and you're like, I'm going to hire this employee and I'm going to pay him $50 an hour. The IRS will say, why are you paying this employee $50 an hour? And you'll say, they're just worth it. And they'll be like, nice try. You're trying to give money. It is an unreasonable salary for this position at a burger restaurant. And they will come after you. People don't get it. They think you can pay somebody whatever you want. The crazy thing, too, it's really frustrating, is when people are like, the leftists say, you should be paying people more money. I can't. Isn't that funny? I mean, you can try. Like that guy like the hypothetical I mentioned, where you pay your employees a higher salary. You can do things like that, do a big stunt, and raise the salaries for everybody. But there's an issue if you're hiring people and paying them above market. The IRS might come to you and say, we want to know why you're paying so much money. This is above market rate. Now, is it illegal? Not necessarily, but it could be an indication of you trying to give people money to bypass certain restrictions and taxes. They may have questions about that. Why are you giving so much money away? It may not be illegal. They may not stop you, but boy, will it jam you up. You just can't do this stuff. So right now, what happens is this tax, in my opinion, is a lie. It's a trick. It's a manipulation. Elon Musk would not be able to sell his stock. There are legal restrictions on selling stock. Elon Musk did sell much of his stock and then paid massive taxes on it. Let's say you're the CEO of a company. You start a company and you sell books on the internet. Cost you $10,000 to start, you saved the money. You own 100% of the shares. 10 years goes by, you're still sole owner, and now that $10,000 investment became $1 billion. The government comes to you and says, you have an unrealized gain. You made basically $1 billion. You got to pay taxes on it. Let's say for the first 5 years, the company is worth a couple $100,000. And then one day they introduce this tax and they say, okay, you for your $10,000 investment has become $300,000. You owe us $60,000. You're like, just because my business is worth $300,000 doesn't mean I have $60,000 to give you. Let's say a year goes by and the company is now worth $1 billion in 1 year. And they say, you're going to owe us, what would that be? $200 million based on this tax. And you're like, we literally don't have that. The value of the company is based off of an IPO we did, and we sold a bunch of stock, and we have, $50 million in cash reserves to grow the business. And they'll be like, sell more. And then you're like, I got to sell my company away? 20% of the company would have to be sold to cover this cost? But then what? How are they going to balance unrealized gains if you then sell it, do you still then have unrealized gains? The system doesn't make sense. I think Joe Biden's just screwing with everybody, to be honest. I think this is trash. It'll never pass. We know it won't pass. We know it makes no sense. But progressives, they need a bone. So Biden's going to throw him a bone and be like, I'm going to tax the rich. Trying to get votes for Democrats. What'll happen now is you're going to get all the Democrats coming out saying, we support this effort to tax the rich. Republicans, on logic, are going to be like, this makes no sense. And the Democrats are going to be like, see, don't vote Republican. They won't tax the rich. Thus is the dirty game we play nowadays. I wish the people who actually wrote policy and tried to make changes actually cared, but in the end, it's obvious. They want power. They will do whatever it takes to get power, and they will lie to you every step of the way. I think there should be some way to stop income inequality. Income inequality is a really, really bad thing. Wealth inequality is a really bad thing. This is nonsense. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.